of us, tea is more than just a drink. It's a ritual. It's how we wake up in the morning, how we unwind after a long day, and how we connect with friends and family. But here's the thing. How often do we stop and ask, is the tea that we're drinking really as fresh and flavorful as it can be?
If you have been drinking tea for your entire life, I think you have been cheated. We reduced the production to consumption time from 7 months or 12 months to literally 7 to 10 days. And that experience, that sip, that single magical moment is truly transformational.
I'm Avni Raja, and on today's episode of Startup To Scaleup, we are sitting down with Kaushal Dugarr, the founder of Teabox, to understand how he's disrupting the centuries-old tea industry. Kaushal, welcome to the show. I'm super excited to have you here. Let me start off by asking you, how did you hit upon this idea? What was that moment when you felt that the tea industry needs an overhaul?
So, Avni, thank you for having me on the show. Teabox is something, or rather, the tea something I literally grew up in. I come from a family that has been in the tea industry for 3 generations. And I grew up in a place called Siliguri, Darjeeling. Literally spent almost every weekend with my father visiting the tea gardens, given that we had a tea industry supplies or tea supplies business. I never knew when I was growing up that I would one day enter or go back into the tea industry. Visiting the tea gardens always left a deep impression in my mind, because I felt that the tea workers were literally magicians who had the power to transform a simple looking tea leaf to a brew which we all cherish. Um, Fast forward, I go overseas for my undergrad, work overseas, but somewhere or the other, there was always a intense desire to come back to the source. Now, when I come back to India after 15, 20 years of staying overseas, I look at the tea industry with a very different perspective, with an outsider's perspective. And the biggest realization was, while the entire world has moved, everything else has moved, tea industry is literally steeped back in time. It still operates like how it used to operate under the Britishers. And that's where the idea came about, that if it has not changed, which means things are very efficient, and if we could make things efficient, we could probably create a lot more value for the people who work at the tea industry. And that was the genesis, or that was the source of how we started about Teabox.
Right. So before we delve a little bit deeper, let me ask you this. For someone who's never heard of Teabox, how would you introduce the brand in a way that grabs their attention? And more importantly, what would you say to someone who thinks, I already have my tea? Why do I need to try something new?
So if you have been drinking tea for your entire life, I think you have been cheated. If you want to experience real tea, you have to drink fresh tea. Tea is also an agricultural product, like fruits and vegetables, which deteriorates over time. And the only way you can drink fresh tea is through a brand like ours, Teabox. We reduce the production to consumption time from 7 months or 12 months or 18 months to literally 7 to 10 days. So what you are experiencing when you have a cup of fresh tea from Teabox, you experience tea which is probably not more than 7 to 10 days old. And that experience, that sip, that single magical moment is truly transformational. So if you want to drink real tea and experience real tea, Teabox is the only way to go, because we take care of light, we take care of heat, we take care of oxygen by getting the tea from the tea garden in a controlled environment within 24 to 48 hours. We have India's first cold chain processing that ensures tea is stored in cold storage, and then we ship it to consumers. So that tea is way, way fresher than what you have been drinking all your life.
Right. So when we look at coffee drinkers, Kaushal, they're all about the details, the beans, brewing method, price points. They seem to know everything about coffee. But when it comes to tea, that's really not the case. And even the price point, people are willing to pay more for coffee than for tea. How does Teabox deal with this? Because I see that Teabox shares things like the picking dates and original origin details, which is really great. But what's been the response to that?
So honestly, I think in India, the understanding of tea is very skewed. India thinks tea is just chai, which is nothing but a concoction of milk, sugar, water put together, and then you boil it to death. Whereas real tea is nothing but you take the leaves and you just steep it with hot water, which is people outside India are used to drinking, mostly foreigners. And the best teas of India have always been exported outside India. Now, when those consumers drink the kind of teas which we give, they are again astounded by the quality. In India, unfortunately, there's a lot of education required for Indians to be educated about tea. That chai is not just tea. There's a lot more to tea when it comes to single estates, to green tea, to herbal teas. But that experience is nevertheless magical once they have a single sip. We are in the process of educating a lot of consumers, and Indians, in fact, are also developing a taste for it as much as they're developing a taste for something like coffee.
Right. So give us a sense, any interesting story comes to mind where sort of you've convinced a hardcore normal chai drinker to try out Teabox. What's the reaction been?
So when a hardcore consumer who's been drinking chai their entire life, their morning starts with chai,
Yes.
when they switch to something like a single brew, it is a direct example would be someone who's drinking a soft drink and straight away goes for a scotch. There's a huge shock, then there is a huge dislike, but once you initially go over the dislike, then you experience a world which you have never experienced before, and then that world is truly magical. It takes a while, it's an acquired taste, but once you get there, you're never going back to anything which you have called or which probably to a certain extent resemble your entire previous life. This experience is magical. Fortunately, a lot more Indians are accepting and adopting to this brew, but we still have a way to go in India.
Hmm. And of course, you mentioned that awareness is one of the big challenges, but given also that India is a very price sensitive market, especially when it comes to something like chai, which you can get for 10 rupees, at a thela outside on the road. What challenges have you had to navigate through to get people to pay that premium?
So very interestingly, our strategy for India and outside India is different. In India, we realized, it'll take too much of an effort for us to convert, as I was mentioning earlier, from pure play chai drinkers to, pure tea drinkers. So we said, if we don't want to do that, why not just give them the best version of chai they can ever get? So we started focusing on chai in India. We again like how we do it with our teas. We source the best chais. We cut down the production to consumption from say 7 months or 12 months to literally 7 to 10 days. And I would say that the reception we have received in India from a chai perspective is phenomenal. Not only is our chai volumes growing multiple times month on month, but the biggest validation is that when some of the big FMCG companies who deal with chai send us legal notices saying that you're doing something misleading the public, essentially trying to bully us. That's where we think that we are trying to create a very strong niche and probably educate or capturing a significant share of the market. What people also don't realize that when you break down the price per cup from a chai perspective, and even if you were to increase by say 2 rupees to even one more rupee, which is essentially not much, people are willing to pay that premium because for them a single cup of chai is not just chai. It's a great start to the day. It's a day without any headache. It's a day which really gives them a kick to be very energetic, and for that they're willing to pay a premium, which for the longest time the big brands in India have been thinking chai is a very price sensitive market, hence the prices have not increased, hence the quality have not increased. We came with the best quality, we came with the best price, and we had tremendous response in India as well.
Right. How do you believe that you can stay competitive in this market? Because now that you have sort of broken the glass ceiling and achieved this, the bigger FMCG companies will now probably try and replicate, say that we can also cut down the time from when the tea is plucked to actually reaching the doorstep of the consumer. So where would your moat lie?
So if they had the ability to do it, they would have done it by now. The problem with the big FMCG companies are essentially they're pure play marketing companies. They don't own the back end, they don't own the gardens, they don't own the supply chain. Our biggest moat is our sourcing, our presence. We are literally in the middle of tea gardens. And this ensures that the tea reaches us within 24 to 48 hours. In addition, we have invested in India's only cold chain processing. which means that once the tea comes and we take it through our own internal quality control, we store your teas at -5 degrees. Now, this is a very unknown thing, very unheard of. Why would you store teas at negative temperatures? Because again, tea is tea. But again, if you break it down into science, tea is also an agriculture product. If your fruits and vegetables have to be stored in a cold chain processing, why not tea? This requires huge investment. This requires a very strong focus. Big FMCG companies, being big FMCG companies, are pure play marketing. They are playing the volume game, low quality game. We play the volume game, but from a very high quality perspective, and that's our mode. That's why instead of trying to doing better, they're trying to bully us by sending legal notices one after the other.
All right. So give us a sense of the scale of Teabox right now in terms of how many tea gardens are you connected to? What's the size of the company?
So we work with almost 125 to 150 tea gardens across India, predominantly in Darjeeling, Assam, into also Northeast. We go all the way up to Meghalaya. Down south, we go to Tamil Nadu, Munnar as well. From a scale perspective, we are in significant three-digit crore revenue company, growing year on year. Last year to year, this year we're growing about 282%. We are profitable, we are cash flow positive, and we expect to be a significant player in the premium tea space in the next 1 or 2 years, which is where we are starting to create a difference, make a difference, and make a presence very, very well known. The biggest difference between us and everyone else is we sell direct to consumer. There's no intermediary, no supply chain. So your tea is 100% fresh. Whereas if you buy from a Tata's or Levers, it goes through multiple intermediaries and touch points, which is where the tea by default will not be fresh.
Right. And I think that's another very important aspect, even for people to be aware about, because you're not just connecting consumers to fresh tea, you're connecting them to the people behind the tea, the millions of
Yes.
pluckers and growers, and obviously whose livelihoods would have improved significantly given that so much of the middle men are cut off.
Yes. So, not many people realize that he is the second largest employer of organized labor in India after the Indian Railways. Millions of people depend on the industry for their livelihood. Unfortunately, from a day to day perspective, they don't get to earn much. And which is where our realization is that the only way to fix the problem is bring the value back to the source. Don't pay the distributors, the retailers, the middlemen. Pay back to the farmers or the tea pluckers who toil day and night in the tea fields from morning to evening to afternoon, to ensure that the best teas are plucked. And the only way that can be done is once, as a company, you source, you keep the value, and you pass it back. Uh, we started Teabox as one of our initiatives in Teabox is what we call Kalpana. With every order, we send a doll which represents Kalpana. Kalpana in Hindi is imagination, and we want our consumers to get a feeling and get a experience that that cup which they drink from our own tea is giving a flight to the feeling and aspiration of every single tea plucker. Because if they're toiling very hard from day to night. They also have higher aspirations, and through us, in some ways, we can probably fulfill a part of their aspirations.
Absolutely. Kaushal, what's the larger vision for T-Box? What's next? Anything you're particularly excited about with regard to innovation or a new market?
So our vision is very clear. We'll continue to push the freshest teas to consumers around the world. Today we touch 125 countries. Out of that, 40 countries we are going very deep. When I say very deep, we'll continue with our D2C channels, but we'll also be exploring newer channels as well. In addition, in India, we'll be opening stores at the airports. Pre-pandemic, we were at Bangalore and Mumbai international airports, and that did very well. We intend to go back because for a lot of consumers in India, it's very difficult to believe that chai or tea can also be sold for 10 or 20 or 30,000 rupees a kg because their price point benchmark is only 500, 600 rupees. But the moment you explain it to them, you get them to have that one sip. It's a new world to them, and that'll require a touch and feel experience for which we'll go back to the airport stores. But our focus is really very simple. Continue to do what you're doing, keep on doing better, expand your sourcing, spend and invest heavily from a capex perspective into supply chain.
All right. Kaushal, I also wanted to now ask you a few questions from the consumer point of view. What's the
Sure.
biggest mistake most people make when brewing their tea at home? Is there a right way, a wrong way?
Yeah. So the biggest mistake when people make when they steep their tea is they put the water together and kind of boil it together, or they would let the water boil, but before letting the water cool a bit, they'll put the teas again. So the best way is you boil the water separately. You boil it to about 100 degrees. You will see bubbles coming up. Once it reaches that 100 degree and the bubbles are coming up, switch it off. Let the bubbles pop out. Once it's popped out, then you take tea separately and you pour hot water over the tea. And you should never put tea in the hot water, because when you put hot water over the tea, it really ensures that the experience and the water kind of touches all and every part of the tea leaf, and the real I would say the infusion, the steeping would happen there. So never drink pure tea like you would make your chai. That'll be a very sad and unnatural death to a great tea.
All right, I'm going to have to try that out first thing tomorrow when I make
Sure.
my chai. But tell us the recipe. I mean, for somebody who wants to make their chai in the morning, who's using, somebody like me, ginger and cardamom and, chai masala and all of those things, what should be the process to be followed? What's the recipe?
Honestly, everyone, the way they make chai is probably best suited to them, because chai is so personalized. I would like it more ginger, perhaps you might like it less ginger. The way I make it personally for myself is half cup, half cup water. When I put the water, let it boil for a bit. Then I put the tea leaves. Again, let it, really, really simmer. The flavor comes out very nicely. Then equal measure, I would put the milk there. Once that reaches a certain once it mixes well, then I would ensure that I would heat it up so that it goes up and down. It kind of infuses very well, but more importantly, the color of the liquor or the color of the drink, which the color of the chai should be slightly stronger, slightly darker, which is where I get an understanding that it's a very strong cup. It's a cup worth drinking. But that's the way I would love it, not necessarily anyone else. Everyone should make the way they have continued to make the chai. The only difference is get fresh raw material rather than 12 to 18 months old chai.
Right. And not boil the tea leaves.
Not boil the tea leaves. That's 100% true.
Right. So also most people don't realize that tea can go stale. So for somebody who's buying tea or who has tea on their shelf, any telltale signs, how does one determine that this tea has gone stale?
Yeah, so that'll be two. Number one, if you have tea at home, first thing you should always keep your tea in a refrigerator, not keep it in your shelves, because same logic, fruits, vegetables is the same logic with tea as well. Second, when you spill your tea, if it doesn't give you that fresh aroma, if it doesn't give you that newness kind of aroma, which means it started to go stale. And when you buy a tea, and if you see the manufacturer pack date is maybe 6 months, 9 months, or 12 months, you should understand it doesn't have too much of shelf life. Even though the big brands would say, you can use your tea for 24 months from the date of packing. If by the time you get your tea, it's already deteriorated to an extent of 70-80%. So I would say not more than 1 or 2 months of good shelf life is left. Whereas if you were to drink tea which is just packed or stored in very good conditions, that you can drink for even 6 months, 9 months, or 12 months as well.
So if somebody wants to try premium teas, perhaps from what Teabox offers, what would you recommend for a newbie? Is there anything like a gateway tea that you would suggest?
So if you're a chai drinker, come and try our Kashmiri Kesar Gulab. It's chai with fresh saffron. It's the chai blend is very specific. We buy it from two particular plantations of Assam, which creates that strong concoction of raw material with saffron, with a bit of cardamom there. It literally transports you to another world from a chai perspective. If you're drinking green tea, try our chamomile green tea. One sip and specially try it before you sleep. I guarantee you will get the perfect sleep if you haven't gotten that in a while. And if you're a Darjeeling connoisseur, try one of our muscatel teas. So our muscatel teas are produced during summer season, where they have a very strong note of muscat grapes, very much like Scotch. It's to be enjoyed, to be experienced, and to be cherished. So if you are into pure tea, especially Darjeeling, a second flush muscadel is not to be missed.
Okay. So give us a quick lesson again for those who may not be aware. What's the difference between first flush, second flush, autumn flush, and winter flush?
So first flush refers to the first picking of the season. Essentially, it refers to spring teas, which comes between March and April. Second flush is the second picking of the season. Summer teas comes predominantly around May and June. Autumn comes again, as the name says, during autumn season, and winter comes during winter season. But what would be even more interesting is not many people know that when you're drinking a black tea or a green tea or a white tea or oolong tea, essentially all teas come from the same tea plant. It's how you manufacture it, it becomes a black or a green or a white or a oolong. And depending on the manufacturing style or depending on whether it's white, green, black, or oolong, antioxidants are also very high or very low. White tea is the healthiest. White tea is the most expensive because it also has the highest amount of antioxidants. Unlike common understanding and knowledge that green tea is healthiest. So if you have an ability and if you have access, always drink white tea over green teas if you are a health conscious person.
All right. So settle another debate for us. Do you think tea bags can deliver the same premium experience as loose tea? What's your view?
Absolutely not. If you're a Puritan, if you're a pure tea drinker, you have to experience loose tea. Not just because the quality of the tea would be great, but drinking loose tea, and especially when you make loose tea, it's a meditative experience. When you put the leaves and you pour water over it, and you will see each and every leaves unfurl. There in many countries like Japan and China, there are rituals around tea drinking and tea brewing as well. So if you want that 5-10 minutes for yourself, where you're disconnected from the world, you have to experience real loose teas and you have to be very immersed in the process. And then when you have that one sip, it would give you a break from the daily hustle and bustle of your day. It'll give you a break. It'll really give you that much needed pause moment needed, every one of us during the day.
Hmm. And what's your view on a lot of tea blends that are now popping up? You have teas with flowers, spices, sometimes superfoods like turmeric. Is that something you see as a trend that's going to continue?
I think yes, to a large extent, because people are very experimentative. India, especially, given that you have a huge amount of young population coming up who want to try different things, and that'll continue to grow. Having said that, India will still predominantly be a chai market because chai is a habit which most of us inculcate from young. No matter how many cups of white tea or green tea or different teas I have during my day, I still need that morning cup of chai. Without that, it's impossible for me to function as well. While on the French, those new blends, the herbal concoctions will come. Predominantly, India was and will continue to be a chai drinking market.
All right, fair enough. And Kaushal, before we get to the rapid fire round, any specific points that you would like consumers to be aware about, or any health benefits that are perhaps not very well known with regard to tea?
So, my entire focus would be is that, when you're drinking tea, A, see if it's as fresh as possible, and B, don't assume that if you're drinking green tea, it'll solve all your health problems. If you are eating everything else which you're not supposed to be eating and you drink 2-3 cups of green tea, it is not going to solve all your problems. I think you will have to have a balanced lifestyle. Third is if you have access to white tea, that's an incredible amount of antioxidants. Always try to get that over a green tea or a black tea. Fourth is go for loose leaf, not as much as tea bags.
All right, let's now get to the rapid fire rounds. What's one underrated tea you wish more people would try?
That would be our mountain rose black tea. That tea comes from Nilgiris. The way we make it is we put black tea, we put rose, black tea, rose, and we also infuse naturally cardamom.
Okay. One tea related myth that you'd like to bust.
That tea was invented or discovered by the Britishers. Tea was always Indian, has been Indian, used to grow in India, but the Britishers created a narrative that tea was brought to India by the Britishers from China, which is the biggest myth, biggest I would say disservice. Tea is such an inherent part of Indian culture, especially in Northeast. Tea has always been there. It's just that we have never been told so much about it in our history book. So the biggest myth would be that tea was brought to us by the Britishers from outside India.
Okay. What's your personal favorite tea?
That would be our Badamtan Moonlight White Tea. So it's a tea which comes during first flush. It comes from a specific garden or tea estate called Badamtam. And that tea, when you have one single sip, it's nothing but a concoction of fruits and flowers. It transports you to another world altogether.
Other than tea, what's your favorite beverage?
I could say coffee, but I'd be lying. I start my day with tea, I end my day with tea, and tea is pretty much that's all for me.
Okay, all right. One country you hope to see Teabox in soon.
The great thing is, we have been selling to about 125 countries. Almost every country where we are able to deliver teas, we are already there. Whereas one country out of which I would like to see a larger penetration would be China.
Okay. The biggest challenge that you would say you faced while scaling up Teabox.
I think the biggest challenge which we faced was no one could understand why should someone drink fresh tea, and no one could understand why should even tea be sold online, because tea is literally available everywhere. And when we started that, everyone almost ridiculed the idea, including my own folks. They thought I was literally wasting my entire time. More importantly, once Mr. Tata invested, in us. My greatest honor is having Mr. Ratan Tata invest in Teabox. That was a game
Right.
changer because it made every single person sit up and take notice about a new age startup in the tea industry called Teabox.
Okay. And finally, Kaushal, one piece of advice that you'd like to give aspiring entrepreneurs?
I think the biggest learning I have, and I've been doing this for almost 11 plus years, the biggest learning we have over the years is, the markets have gone up and down. The only reason we are still here is because we did not give up. Had we given up earlier, and we had a lot of moments where, it almost felt like there's no point continuing, I don't think we would be here and we would be doing such incredible growth and revenues. And so the biggest advice is, if you're starting a startup, you know be ready for the long haul, and be ready for the incredible tough moments when everyone around you will tell you to give up, and the only reason you might survive is when you take a decision that you will not give up.
All right, Kaushal, on that note, thank you so much for joining us on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. And I, for one, have got so many things to try out from this conversation that I'm going to do immediately.
Thank you so much, Avni, for talking to us about the tea industry and for having me on the show.
Well, with that, it's a wrap on this episode of Startup to Scale Up. Hope you enjoyed it and had some good takeaways from this conversation. Don't forget to subscribe to Business Hook so you don't miss our next episode of the show.